Correct.
Okay. Yesterday you said that when the door was opened by Rich Chrisman, the two dogs came walking out. That's the word you used yesterday, wasn't it?
They came from the back hallway area.
Sir, yesterday you told us that the two dogs came walking out. Did you not?
I'd have to look at the transcript.
Okay. Page 37?
290.
Of the, I'm sorry, what's
298 is the number.
298? Line 20, 19 through 22. Does that refresh your memory?
Yes.
Now, can you answer my question? Yesterday you told us that the dogs were walking toward Chrisman.
Could I read it?
Oh, of course. Read it to yourself. You can't read it out loud because it's not in evidence yet, so it's to refresh your memory. That's what I'm asking you. If it doesn't refresh your memory, just say it doesn't, and then we'll find another way to read it.
Yes.
Yes, why?
It refreshes my memory.
All right. And now you would agree with me that yesterday you told us that the dogs were walking towards Chrisman.
No.
Okay. But you do agree, in your mind, one of them was pit bull?
Looked like a pit bull to me.
Right. Yes, you've always characterized it as a pit bull.
Yes.
Right? Its teeth, it growled the whole time that this incident happened, all these about a minute. Right?
Barked.
Not growling? Just barking.
I remember it barking.
Okay, not growling then.
I remember it barking.
You haven't said growling.
I remember it barking.
Baring its teeth, showing its white teeth?
From what I can recall, barking.
Talk to you about another part of your training. You officers are trained in the use of pepper spray, aren't you?
Yes.
And there's a course in the academy that's part of your training, correct?
Yes.
And when I say a course in the academy, you understand me to mean while you're learning to be and being taught to be an effective police officer, right?
Yes.
So before you're a full-fledged police officer and allowed to go out and do your duties full-time, you go through the academy, and part of that training is OC or pepper spray training, correct?
Yes.
If you don't pass that particular part, you're not going to be an officer, are you?
Correct.
And part of that training is you have pepper spray sprayed into your face, correct?
Yes.
And part of that training is not that you leave the room, is it?
No.
Because if you have pepper spray sprayed in your face at the academy and then you just walk out, you're not going to be a police officer, are you?
When I went through the academy, it's different than it is now.
Okay. So you can't answer my question. That was wrong. Weren't you primarily concerned that afternoon on October 5th, 2010, with your safety, sir?
I was concerned with everything,
Yeah.
and my safety is important as well.
Okay. My question is, weren't you primarily concerned? You were concerned for your safety. You were not wearing a vest.
No, I was not.
And by vest, tell the jury what I'm talking about.
A vest that stops or tries to stop bullets.
You had one,
Yes,
and you made a decision that day, as you did other days, not to wear it, right?
yes,
And you're allowed to do that, right?
correct.
Are you safer with or without the vest?
In respect to bullets, I'm safer with the vest.
Yesterday, you told us that when Officer Chrisman shot the dog, you were inside the trailer, right?
Yes, I was at the breach of the door.
You were inside the trailer, right?
Yes, breach of the door.
When the dog falls, you're outside the doorway, correct?
From what I can remember, I was in the breach of the door.
Let me try again. You told Detective Porter on October 5th, 2010, that when the dog falls, and he says, "Are you still at the doorway?" And you say, "I'm outside the doorway." That's what you told him, didn't you?
Yes,
This breach, that's not the word you used on October 5th, 2010, in response to his question, is it? That's your answer to me today.
yes.
But when you were asked this question on July 26th, 2012, where are you when Chrisman shoots the dog? You said, somewhere in this threshold area, in front, in the tiled area. That's what you told the questioner back in July of 2012, right?
Yes,
Okay. Told Detective Porter outside the doorway, told this person in the tile area, right?
yes.
The tile area is not outside the doorway, is it?
The tile area is in the,
The tile area is
Fine
not
line.
outside the trailer, is it, sir?
you are correct.
Thank you. It's inside the trailer.
Yes.
Thank you. think I'm at a point where
And ladies and gentlemen, there's a legal issue that we need to solve before the crackdown will resume, so we'll take the lunch recess a little bit early if we need to really work. So please remember the admonition, keep an open mind about the stuff of the case. We'll see everybody at 1:30, jury will excuse. Yes. Please be seated. There's a Garrity issue and a issue regarding a statement that the defense wants to proffer quoted by quoting Mr. Chrisman. We'll deal with those in 5 minutes. Some of us need to Please or not? Are you trying to lay a fact foundation?
am I trying to...
You want Officer Virgil in the room or out of the room?
Oh, yeah, out of the room.
All right, officer, you can step outside when you're ready to. I'm sorry, Mr. Martinez, do you need the officer in the room or out of the room do you need him in the room or out of the room to do what you need to do for these two?
Well, for the other hearing, he's going to testify, so, yeah, see, that's in the end, but I don't, with regard to the Garrity issue, I don't, if you want to, that's fine.
Okay. Record your respectful presence of Mr. Chrisman, counsel. The jurors are not present. Mr. Marins had begun to question Mr. Vigillo about the deposition he had made to Sergeant, and I didn't catch the name, but it's reflected in Exhibit 292.
EGA, EGEA, I believe.
All right, there was an objection, and I didn't know enough of the facts. So I asked Mr. Marins to go on another topic. He did, so here we are. It's your objection, Mr. Martinez, you go first.
Under Garrity, the police officers,
Could I back up the truck? I don't know who these players are. Who's talking to who, why, and when?
it's Officer Vigillo speaking to Sergeant Julie Gia. I don't know much about it either because I'm not allowed to know it, and I'm just reading what's here. Apparently this took place August 16th. It doesn't say when it took place, but and there's a conversation between Officer Vigillo and somebody named Sergeant Julie Gia. And this was my understanding part of the investigation into the October 5th, 2010 killing. I believe that Richard Chrisman also made statements with regard to this.
And you're concerned about this part right now.
Right. Well, it sort of impacts this part here. That's the only reason I said that. And what happens is when an officer discharges, I believe the taser in this case, there's this investigation. Although this what involves a larger investigation, and this involved Officer Virgillo's discharge of his weapon, and it's protected and cannot be used. So,
Wait, you say that. Why not?
well, this is a surprise to me because this wasn't provided to me, but
That's a Rule 15 issue as opposed to a constitutional. That's why I'm trying to get a sense of what your objection is.
there's a case that's called Garrity that says that
Well aware of Garrity.
says when there is a compelled statement.
So I don't have a factual predicate for that. I don't know enough to tell. You're telling me that Officer Virgillo gave a compelled involuntary statement. I don't know that.
I would have been here to tell you what the circumstances were.
All right. you. If I could, maybe short-term just a little bit. Officer Joe, do you remember making a statement to Sergeant Agia?
Yes.
What were the circumstances?
I was compelled to talk in reference to this incident.
How were you compelled?
I had no choice. They told me that I needed to speak with them, and I invoked my Garrity rights. They still told me that I needed to speak with them, and it was my understanding if I didn't speak to them, I was going to be fired.
And under that, because of that honest threat, you gave an answer.
Yes.
You can give truthful answers.
Yes.
Any questions, Mr. Martinez?
No.
Mr. Merritt?
Yes, sir. In fact, the transcripts and the statements from these interviews with Sergeant Agia you were asked about them at your civil deposition, and you answered those questions. You didn't say, I can't answer those, right? They said, didn't you say this to Sergeant Agia? They played clips for you during the deposition, right?
Yes.
And you answered all the questions, right?
Yes.
Under oath?
Yes.
All right. And they just tell you when they say Garrett, they just say, you have to tell us, but these statements you make to us, officer, cannot be used against you in a criminal prosecution, correct?
They never said that to me.
But that's what you went, okay, fine.
Mr. Martinez?
Are you a lawyer? Were you the representing yourself at this position that you gave?
I'm not a lawyer. I didn't represent myself.
Did you know whether or not you could have objected on your own with regard to these statements when they were being asked of you?
I had no clue.
Nothing else.
Yeah, that's a new area.
Only if you want to talk me out of it, Mr. Martinez.
Talk you out of it. Okay.
I think he can waive it. If it's a protected right, he waived it.
Okay. No, I don't want to talk about it.
Sir, please step back. Just to be precise, Mr. Martinez, you will agree that the statements that the defense is seeking to impeach Mr. Officer Regilla on are relevant to the issues for the trial.
I don't know because I haven't read the statements. I just was given that this morning.
Well, based upon the questions that were shot, that's good. Are you it's your position that these questions should not be asked when answer is not given because of Rule 15, because of constitutional protections to protect Officer Regillo, because of voluntariness? I'm trying to get a sense, what's the nature of your objection?
He was compelled to give these statements or be fired. In terms of whether or not he waived it or not, he's not a lawyer to know whether or not he should waive.
But isn't that normal attorney-client privilege? Folks waive their privileges all the time, and they don't have to have a knowing, intelligent, voluntary court proceedings to do that.
I do believe that they do have to have it. But I don't remember any court allowing those statements to come in.
I'm just talking general attorney-client privilege law.
Right. And what I'm saying, I'm not talking about the attorney-client privilege. I'm talking about his waiver, whether it was knowing or intelligently done at the deposition. I mean, if he was asked at that point, you can waive it or not waive it, these are your rights, I don't know what he would have said.
The court believes that if it's a privilege, Garrett is a privilege, Officer Regillo is the possessor of the privilege. He waived it by answering questions on these topics. I'm not saying it's a general waiver of everything, but on the topics being asked at this case, the court would allow the use of 294 if appropriate impeachment.
Your Honor, the transcripts of of that are exhibits 2, 88, 89, 90, and 91. There's audio clips for the other 294.
That's all I knew about. I only know what I know. So 294, to the extent that that was offered, the court does not believe that Gary, in this situation, prevents the impeachment. If, following instructions, we want to get into a voluntariness instruction for the jurors as to how they treat that, we can deal with that down the line. Mr. Martinez, you had an objection to the intended quoting of Mr. Chrisman by Officer Virgilio regarding grabbing the weapon.
Right, I do have it, but before we leave this, you indicated that there was a waiver with regard to these particular topics, the ones that he spoke about, and that would be in the deposition that was on July 26th of 2012. So if he's going to be impeached with it, it has to come from the July 26, 2012 waiver, as you've defined it, not from the previous statements.
Again, you guys have me at a disadvantage. I don't know how many different interviews there are. I thought this interview that they were using for the impeachment was on the topics that were asked, even though they were covered in a different interview, for my purposes. He says the light is red.
Okay?
And then he tells Sergeant Mejia the light is green.
Right.
It says the light is red in the detective quarter. He says the light is green in this Garrity situation.
Right.
I would allow the impeachment of either detective Porter's statement or the Garrity statement so that the jurors can hear both statements and decide which ones they choose to believe with either.
And I understand that, as long as we don't have the issue later on where defense counsel then says, well, you know, that actually wasn't covered on the deposition, when Mr. Martinez has a chance to compare them, say, you know, I really didn't, it really wasn't weighed, this was one that wasn't weighed. That's the issue that I have, and I understand that you made your ruling, I don't want anything quibble with that, but I'm...
Well, I just got to deal with the questions that are in front of me, so I'm not making an anticipatory ruling, I'm not making a declaratory judgment here. I'm just ruling on the questions that have been asked so far.
But we're going to get to that.
Well, then, let's get to it now. I don't know what your question is.
I agree. Your Honor.
Let me ask you, are all of the issues that you are going to seek to impeach him from the Sergeant Mejia situation, statements, questions that he was asked and then he answered in his later deposition?
Not all of them, those are.
But
Your Honor.
then let me ask this, you can choose to answer this question or not answer the question. How were you able to secure the Garrity statement?
Just like the civil lawyers got them. You're asking to get them because they are available. You can make a public information request and get them. Mr. Officer Virgilio's attorney, Mr. Farragut's been here for 2 or 3 days. Mr. Farragut met with the civil lawyers that represent Mr. Virgilio. All of these transcripts were turned over to Mr. Walken, who represents Mr. I think it's Fernandez, his dad, Mr. Rodriguez, and all of these transcripts were turned over to Mrs. Fernandez's lawyer, the civil lawyer. All of this is animal. Why no one gave them? Why Mr. Farragut didn't give them to Mr. Because they only cannot be used in a criminal proceeding against them. They don't allow an officer to get on the stand as a witness in a criminal case for the state and lie.
Well, let me ask, what do you believe Garrity to mean? Is it a privilege, is it a right, and if so, to whom and when?
It belongs to the person that is, well, it belongs to the individual who it belongs to Mr. Gillo, it belongs to Mr. Chrisman, it belongs to any officer who's asked questions and invoked Garrity.
Is it-
The statements, I'm sorry.
Is it a privilege of confidentiality a la attorney-client, or is it just a Fifth Amendment privilege?
It's a privilege that, yes, it's a privilege that says you cannot use these answers that I give you. I'm an officer. Mr. Officer Marins, tell us what happened, and if you get charged with a crime, what you tell us can't be used against you, but it can be used otherwise.
Well, then let's talk
And that's
about,
why the civil people get them, all of them. They have,
let's talk about the voluntariness of it. We're trained that involuntary statements are not reliable, and therefore are not admissible. Criminal law, we define the involuntary statement as something that was coerced by a threat or by a promise. Is this a coerced statement and therefore unreliable?
not coerced in that sense, but, and unreliable, no, sir. But he's waived it anyway, because he can't just pick and choose. What's happened is he goes to the deposition, they ask him several, I mean, you've seen the transcript, it's this thick. And Mr. Officer Gillo had a lawyer there, so for Mr. Martinez to say he didn't have a lawyer there is just nonsense. He had a lawyer there. He was asked question after question about what he told Sergeant G, and he answered them all. And now Mr. Martinez is telling you, well, okay, Judge, you rule on those, you can, Mr. Martinez gets to ask him these 10 or 20, but the other ones he can just lie about. We can fool this juror. That's not what Garrity says, Your Honor.
Mr. Martinez.
Well, I thought our understanding was that you had already ruled that.
Well, I ruled on what I know, and I've been told I didn't know enough.
It appears that they're now saying that they want all of these statements, even though he was compelled to give these statements. If somebody gives a compelled statement, by definition, it is something that should not, it can't be used. And I made my argument.
Well, I may give everybody an hour to figure this out. It's always been in the context of a defendant's statements.
Right.
I'm not aware of any cases that talk about it in the context of a witness. So I'm going to take this under advisement for 50 minutes, and if anybody has a case, I'll be happy to read it.
All right.
We're running late, but let's deal with the inadmissible hearsay. Mr. Marins, what do you hope to proffer through Officer Vigila regarding statements made by Mr. Chrisman?
On October 5th, 2010, during an interview with Sergeant Agia, and actually there was another officer there, Officer Klein was there.
Could we get a page reference, at least?
Yes.
Yes, I'm sorry. Page 64, line 3 of the first interview, October 5th, 2010. This is at the scene. Officer Klein?
Just for my purpose, is this part of the Garrity statement?
Yes, sir. We're talking about the same thing.
So you may be packaging these things, and is this a Garrity statement that was not covered by his civil deposition?
I believe so, yes, sir.
All right.
However, just to make it further complicated, he made this statement to other officers at the scene. Officer
First, a he.
Officer Person.
Okay.
So in other words, what I'm about to read you is something that Virgilio said he overheard. And we have other witnesses, officers, I think Officer Rudy and Kincannon, who also heard this statement at the scene. In any event, the question and answer is this, page 64. Officer Klein, detective. Does he, meaning Chrisman, spontaneously say anything to you? Virgilio, I heard him say, I don't know who he said it to, but I heard him say, was probably 20 feet away from me, he tried to grab my gun, man. That's 6.
Do you have any other context of the time frame of when that was?
Yes, sir. Just before that, Virgilio says, I stepped, on page 63, I stepped out of the trailer, I gave the 998, I said, roll fire, subjects down, no injury to officers. I said, Chrisman, we need to clear the home. Chrisman did the lead, he cleared the home. I saw the other dog hunkered down in the back bedroom, cleared the home, come out. That's when the fire officers got there, didn't have a conversation with Chrisman at all. Officer Klein, does he spontaneously say anything to you? That's when he said
Mr. Martinez.
I'd ask that Officer Virgilio take a stand so he can explain.
Okay. After you and Mr. Chrisman had cleared the trailer after the shooting and after you had cleared the trailer, did you hear Officer Chrisman say anything?
No.
Mr. Merritz?
I have no question.
Mr. Martinez?
Do you remember having this compelled conversation, and do you remember whether or not the following took place? I'll just read it. I stepped out of the well, I stepped out of the trailer, I gave the 998, I said, roll fire, subjects down, no injury to officers. I said, Chrisman, we need to clear the home. Chrisman did the lead, he cleared the home. I saw the other dog hunkered down in the back bedroom, cleared the home, came out, and that's when fire and the officers got there. Didn't have a conversation with Chrisman at all about, does he spontaneously say anything to you? And you answered, I hear him say, I don't know who he said it to, but I heard him say he was probably 20 feet away from me. He tried to grab my gun, man. What's the context of that? Did you actually hear Mr.
What
Chrisman
time
say?
did you say that in that previous image? Do you remember saying that?
I remember having an interview, but that's not an accurate depiction of what happened. I didn't hear Chrisman say that.
Okay. Thank you. Under 403, the court would grant the motion to preclude the attempt to use Officer Virgilio to admit Mr. Chrisman's statement. And make more rulings about the other folks that you talked about.
The 403.
Right.
Thank you.
Everybody at 125 so that I can move on the pending motion.
Just told by Mr. Gann that he found a case. Could I give you a case?
If you got it, I'll read it.
There's, I believe it's Castigar, K-A-S-T-I-G.
Is that the Supreme Court case?
Yeah.
I do.
All right. It's been a long time since I read that. If you could email it to me.
I can't, I got a site right now, I'll email you a case, I'll send it to your system.